Welcome back to the It Starts With You podcast. I am so excited for our conversation today. We are having such an important conversation with Katharine Manning around empathy at work and creating more trauma-informed leadership. Katharine, thank you for joining us today.
It is so much fun to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
Oh my goodness, I'm just so honored that you joined me. And we met originally, quite a few years ago online. I was actually trying to remember, been in a lot of communities. It was in a community that we were in together, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We were in a mastermind together, and I feel like it was maybe 2020, something like
Yeah.
that.
It's like, I feel like honestly from 2020 to now, right? We blink and the years just
I
like went.
know.
But I have met so many amazing people online that we've never actually met in person, but I knew that I wanted to have you on the podcast because first of all, I just know I've been so inspired by your work, but I also just felt like you have this very genuine connection and you're doing such important work. So really excited for those of you to listen to all of the amazing things that Katharine has to share with us today. Katharine Manning provides training and consultation on building trauma-informed workplaces and is the author of The Empathetic Workplace, 5 Steps to a Compassionate, Calm, and Confident Response to Trauma on the Job. She has worked on issues of trauma and victimization for more than 25 years, including 15 years at the Justice Department, where she was a senior attorney advisor consulting on victim issues in cases like the Madoff investment fraud and the Boston Marathon bombing. I had to read that a few times, Katharine, when we were getting ready for the podcast. I'm like, wow, you have been involved in some big things.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like I was sort of fortuitous when I came into the Justice Department. I started there in 2004, and it was right when a new crime victims' rights law passed, and I happened to be in a position where I was the lawyer who kind of had this in my portfolio, and quickly was the department's expert on this new law. And so everybody kind of came to me with every victim issue. And it was really terrifying, let's be clear. But also it meant that very quickly I just saw a lot of different issues from around the department about what people were dealing with when it came to working with victims of crime.
And the things that one of the first things I'd love if you could talk a little bit about, because one of the first things I was thinking about, and obviously I knew what you did, but again, just like reading it and being like, wow, when you think of the magnitude and the intense things that you are surrounded by in your work, can you just share, like, how do you personally manage yourself through being surrounded by all of these really intense stories and situations that you're a part of?
Oh, thank you for that question. It's true. I think we have to recognize that it takes a toll on us too when we hear about hard things. And that is true whether it's like you're scrolling through your feed and you're seeing pictures of, a horrible thing that happened somewhere in the world, or reading the news, or when you're sitting down with a friend who says, oh, there's something I need to tell you. They disclose to you something really, really difficult. Like, those things take a toll on us. And certainly, over the course of my work, I've encountered a lot of really, really difficult things. And I guess a few things, help me. One is, like I've got a few tools, right? Like I've learned, one, that I have to have really good boundaries about it. That was one of the things that I learned in my 20s. I had terrible boundaries when I first started doing this work. And when I first came into this area, I really intended to do, I was going to be, help women experiencing violence in their intimate relationships get restraining orders. That was my plan.
Oh, wow.
And I realized after doing it for like a month, oh, I cannot do that because I will end up with a house full of women and children, because I had no ability to set boundaries. So one is I have pretty good boundaries, and I recognize that people have their own path to walk, and I can provide support, but I can't fix anybody else's life for them. I'm humble enough to recognize that I couldn't, even if, they have their own path and they know better than I do what is the right next step for them. Mm-hmm. So one is good boundaries. Two is I just have a few tools to help me navigate the conversation or the challenging moment. Like, remembering to breathe is a big one. And in particular, a deep, slow breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. And it helps to slow slow down your exhale. That seems to be kind of where the magic happens. Another one that I use a lot is just like an easy kind of mindfulness technique. I'm like a very tactile person. And so for me, like when I can feel myself starting to get agitated, I put my hand on the desk and I just feel underneath me, like, okay, I feel like, is it smooth or rough? I will kind of tap my fingers together, like just kind of grounding myself in that way. Other people, they're more visual. So they look around the room and they identify like 5 blue things that they see, or they count the clouds that they see in the sky. There's different things you can do, but those are just about engaging one of your 5 senses and grounding you in the present moment. So that's a way, like in the present moment, to just kind of help yourself kind of calm down. And then ultimately the thing that I think helps me be able to sustain this over the long term is some of the incredible things I've seen people do. I mean, as you said, like I've been doing this for a long time now. And because of that, I've gotten a little bit of like a sweep of what people are able to come out of and accomplish later, right? So I've talked to people who have come through circumstances where I think, like, I don't know how you are even standing before me right now, given what I know of what you've been through. And today they are like, they've started a nonprofit organization, or they passed a law, or they, did some incredible art installation that inspires people, that's in a park somewhere or something like that. I mean, just really astonishing things out of the pain and tragedy they experience. They have made the world better for all of us. And so that really helps me to remember that like where they are today is not where they're going to be in 6 months or 6 years or 16 years. And that's, I just find it so inspiring. And that's really what helps keep me going.
Oh, I just got goosebumps while you're talking through that, because that is first of all, thank you for sharing those very tangible things that you do, because not only is it great to just hear your story of how you navigate that, but I know people listening as well, and obviously we're going to talk about this, but some people have gone through, smaller traumas through really big traumas, and some people wouldn't feel as though they've gone through trauma, but they might have someone in their life, or, either personally or professionally, obviously when we're talking about from the workplace perspective, like someone else is experiencing it, and you might by being around them, by hearing about it, not know what to do. And so I really appreciate you sharing that, of having the boundaries first, which I can see how that could be so hard, because you want to just like help everybody, but you can't if you don't protect yourself. And then those tools around breathing, and I think we forget how important breathing is. Like we do it all the time, but do we really breathe? Yeah. And having those tactile things. And then I really love that last one that you said about, it sounds like, really instead of focusing on like feeling bad for them or jumping into it with them, and it's almost like being able to see like what they're going to turn into, what's going to happen from this, that helps you get through that.
Yeah, just trusting that like they've got their own journey, and I might not be able to see where it's going to take them. But I'm willing to sit with them today, because I know that my willingness to sit with them with this painful time helps them get to whatever is next on the path for them.
Mm-hmm. And we see that. I mean, it went through horrible things that have happened to people or to large groups of people. Like in it, it's really hard to be like, oh, and I think sometimes people have the best intentions of maybe saying things to people of like, well, it will all mean something down the road. And it's like, I don't think when you're in it, you want to hear that. Yeah. However, to have that belief, and to be able to, just internally like, hey, I know that I've seen people come through these things, and like, I'm, to know, that's just really powerful, because we do see that like people have gone through these unimaginable things, and then they just come out to do these unbelievable things.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you made that clarification, Julie, because it's true. Like I've been through hard times in my life before, and I can say, sincerely here, like I wouldn't be sitting here today if I hadn't been through those hard times in the past. But if somebody had said that to me at the time, like, oh, you're going to be grateful for this, like I would have wanted to just kick them in the shins, right? Like, yeah. So maybe don't say it in the moment, but it's more like helping you kind of have the perspective of like your ability to sit with them in this and just be present with them where they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love that word, that perspective, because everybody has hardships in their life, right? And, I think of like, I've been open on the podcast of like, we've had a lot of personal things happen. However, for me, it's really putting things into perspective to go, wow, but people have gone through, like for me, what helps me and helps me to not relate to them, but to be like just admiration of these people who've gone through things that are way more than I could possibly even fathom. And I think that again just humanizes all of us to go where everyone's on this journey who has experienced, some people have experienced much more trauma than others. But if we can just have this like admiration for their strength versus feeling bad for them, or I don't know, like judgment of it, whatever it is, I think just like you said, to be able to sit with people and just, I just amazed at what people can do.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, like one thing that I've heard so often is people saying like, oh, well, like I don't have the right to be upset because this other person has it worse than me. And I remember like it really hit home to me one time. I was talking to this woman who is Ukrainian, and she had to flee her country. She had like, I mean, just horrific circumstances. I mean, bombs in her backyard, and her husband, she had to leave her husband because he was not allowed to leave. And I mean, it just awful. And I was saying, I'm so sorry that you're in this situation. And she was like, oh, well, what I'm going through is nothing. And, other people have it so much worse. And I just thought, it is like, I guess, a tendency that we have to, like, well, we feel like we're not allowed to be upset, and, we're not allowed to kind of be where we are. And I think, I don't know, that it's important to kind of hold both. Like I am allowed to feel the way that I'm feeling, and it doesn't take away anything from somebody else. And certainly I have never heard people say, like I can't imagine anybody who was back in Ukraine thinking, well, how dare she be upset? Like, if anything, people just want you to be healthy enough so that you can be whole and good and healthy, because that's when you're able to lend a hand to somebody else. And the more you deny yourself what you need to get there, the less able you are to lend a hand to somebody else when they need it.
Oh, that's such a good point, right? What came up for me was this idea that like we can hold both, right? So you can hold both your pain and what you're going through, and it's okay to sometimes be like, wow, I'm not okay. And also to be able to recognize that while other people also have those things, and it's not diminishing either one of yours.
Right.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
that's really powerful. So when you think of I mean, so your book, The Empathetic Workplace, and you're helping create more trauma-informed workplace. Like, could you help us, for those who are listening, we hear about this, right, which is so important. I think we're becoming more aware of this. I'm sure in your work you realize there's a lot more, progress that needs to be made in this. But could you help define it for people listening? Like, what does it even mean to have an empathetic workplace or to be trauma informed? Like, what does that mean for people?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, like when I talk about trauma, the definition of trauma I use is just that it's a psychological injury that impairs your performance. So that is kind of a slimmed down version of the definition of trauma from SAMHSA, or the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. What I like about that definition is that in contrast to a lot of other definitions, like a lot of definitions of trauma will give you a listing of events, like you have experienced violence in your home, or, you've lived in a war zone or whatever. They'll give you a listing of events and say, if you've experienced one of these, then you've experienced trauma. I'm not crazy about that kind of definition, because we all can come through similar or even the exact same events and be very differently affected by them. You can imagine three people who are in a car accident together could all walk away from that car accident very differently. Maybe one person is like kind of shaken up, but can engage with law enforcement, check on others, make their way into work, and they're kind of okay. Maybe a second one like falls apart at the scene, can't go into work that day, can't get in a car for a week. Maybe the third one seems fine, goes into work that day, but then like falls apart that night. None of those is the right reaction. They're all just kind of within the range of normal human responses to a traumatic event. So I don't want us to get too caught up in like, you tell me what happened to you, and then I will let you know if that counts as trauma. Instead, like, Just focus on the person in front of you, and do they need some help to be able to perform in the ways that they need and want to? And if so, let's get them the help. Because that's really what we're talking about in the workplace. Like, you're not your colleague's therapist, even if you are a therapist, even if you're a phenomenal listener, and I'm sure many of you really, really are. Like, that's not your role in the workplace. Your role in the workplace is to provide people with the support that they need to be able to thrive, to be able to perform. I think of it as almost like the EMT skills. Like, you're the one who's present on the scene, you provide them some immediate support, and then help them get to the experts that they need for any additional help. So that's what I mean by trauma. And trauma can be anything. It can be something like in the workplace, out of the workplace. I mean, there are things like in the workplace, obviously things like sexual harassment and bias, to large scale things like we're having layoffs and restructurings, and, things out in the world can also affect us in the workplace, which again can be individual, like somebody struggling with alcoholism or addiction or mental or physical illness or violence. Or it can be something, writ large, like, an episode of mass violence in the community, or political upheaval, or, Israel-Palestine. Those kinds of things can all have an effect on how people are showing up in the workplace and their ability to perform in the ways that they need and want to. So that's what trauma is and how it shows up at work. To be a trauma-informed workplace, all that means is we understand that trauma exists, that it has an impact on the people that we work with, and we are making our best efforts. We are trying to mitigate those effects and trying to prevent new ones as best we can. That's all we mean by trauma-informed.
Oh, that's such a thank you for sharing that, because I think you just took something that feels so complex and so big and simplified it in the way for people to understand, and also to just realize that I think one of the things that really stood out for me of what you said is that it's really nobody's right to judge whether it's trauma or not. If it's something that was traumatic for them, that, and I think you said impairs
Impairs your performance.
Yeah, it affects your performance. And so I think that's such a big thing, because a lot of people, what I see is there's like this judgment or these misconceptions, or even this, we're getting too soft, or it's, everybody's so sensitive, right? Like, that's what I think I hear sometimes from some organizations, like, oh, everybody's so sensitive, you can't say anything. And of course, I think there are extreme ends, right, to all of this. However, I think sometimes that's just like, it's just being brushed under the rug when there really are things that need to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to me, I hear the exact same thing. And I feel like it's kind of like we were just talking about. It's both, right? So I think that it is possible to be both. It is possible to have that kind of open-minded, stance, right? Like, I am willing to meet you where you are. If you are saying this is something that I need to be able to perform, great, let's have that conversation. And also to have high standards of excellence in the workplace, because I also feel very strongly that empathy for one person has to mean empathy for everybody. So just as a quick example, I remember during the pandemic talking with a person who's a leader of a small organization. It's a nonprofit organization. She's the executive director, and she has 3 managers who work directly under her. And during the pandemic, one of the managers just kind of vanished, like for hours in the middle of the day, was unreachable by email, phone, text message. The people who worked under her started going to the other managers for help, or like just trying to muddle through on their own, or like stuff just wasn't getting done. And I said to this executive director, that sounds like a really hard situation. How long has this been going on? And she said, I don't know, about a year. And I said, oh my gosh, that's really long. Like, how did it get to this point? And she said, well, she's a single mom, and I know how hard COVID is for parents, and I really want to be empathetic. And I thought, well, empathy for one has to mean empathy for everybody. The work that this woman isn't doing, it doesn't just vanish, right? Other people are having to pick up the slack, and it doesn't serve anybody if they're not doing the important work that they are doing in the community. If the quality of that slides, that doesn't serve anybody. So, one of the things I think it's important to remember is that being an empathetic leader doesn't mean being conflict averse. Like, we can have hard conversations. It just means, and it also doesn't mean this woman is like a terrible person, right? It just means let's have an honest conversation. Okay, what is it that you need? It appears that this, is not working, right? You need a different kind of setup. And maybe that means that we need to have somebody else on your staff step in an acting role, or maybe it means you need to go part-time or take a leave of absence, or there's like a million options, but we have to be willing to have the conversation first. To me, I always feel like it's about trust. One of the things I saw again and again in my work with crime victims is people are willing. You can say almost anything to people if they believe that you respect them and are going to be honest with them. And certainly, sometimes at DOJ, we had to say really horrible things to victims, having to tell somebody that there's not going to be a charge for the person who murdered their child. That's a pretty horrific thing to have to say to somebody. But much better to do that than to avoid the phone call and dance around it and pretend that maybe later there will be, if that it's not. Just have the conversation. Just be willing to respect this person enough to say the hard thing, because then the person is able to arrange their life and make their decisions and do what needs to be done to get through the hard time, right?
Oh, goosebumps again. I don't know how many times I'm going to get goosebumps on this on this episode, but I was just leaning in, and I actually was jotting so many things down while you were talking. I literally was like, okay, we're about 20 minutes in, and I'm going to come back and re-listen to this a lot and like tell people to listen to this, because what you just said was so important. So I just really want to make sure I highlight. I literally put in quotes like, being empathetic is not conflict averse. And actually, the way that you just frame that up for everybody to go, I think sometimes people are like, someone in their personal life and their professional life has gone through something traumatic, and you don't want to make them think about it, or you don't want to bring it up. And so you might not ask them how they're doing. And then when I've heard someone personally in my life who has gone through something traumatic, who I asked, I said, when I see you, should I say something? Should I not say something? Like, I don't want to. And she said to me, she's like, I'm thinking about it anyways. And so for you to say something, it just acknowledges that you recognize that. And if I don't want to talk about it, I'll tell you. And so that just really made me think about from the workplace too, of if you have a well-intended manager who's like, hey, I don't want to bother them, or I know they're going through something, so they don't say anything, but then all of a sudden it creates this ripple effect of other issues, then you're actually doing them a disservice. And so I love that you said that it's actually, helping someone be willing to have the conversation. It's to create the trust, to help them feel respected, to say the hard thing instead of ignoring it because of what could happen if you don't address it.
Yeah, absolutely. There was this fascinating study I read where they asked managers, do you think that kind of your concern with your employees' mental health, and in particular, like during hard times, like, is that your job? And they were like, not really. Like, it's, I guess it's nice if I do it, but that's not really central to my role. But then they asked the employees the same question, and overwhelmingly they were like, of course that's my manager's job, So whether or not you think it's your job as a manager, your employees think it is. They are expecting you to care about those things. And also, frankly, when you do that, when you get it right, it's astonishing the level of trust and, all the incredible things that come out of it. Let me just share a quick story. I have a friend who, she was working at a company that was going through a really, really difficult, stressful time. And her part of the job was stressful. Her boss's part of the job was even more stressful. And she was talking to her boss, and she was telling him, all the matters she was working on and giving him updates. And at the end of the of the meeting, she said, and I also, I just wanted to let you know I'm going to be taking a couple days off at the end of the week because I'm going to go visit my father because he's ill. And her manager put down his notebook where he'd been taking all the notes, and he looked her in the eye and he said, you should have started with that. He said, none of this is as important as what you're going through with your father. Please, please take as much time as you need. And he was so adamant about it that she ended up taking 2 weeks instead of the 2 days that she had intended. And I mean, she was still like doing work and all of that, but she was with her father as she was doing it. And because of that, she was with her father when he died.
Oh,
And I mean, she said, I asked her, like, she hasn't worked with this man for a decade now. And I said, how do you feel about him? And she goes, oh, I would walk through fire for that man to this day. Like when we really show up for people in those moments, I mean, those are when those kinds of relationships of trust are really, really built. And I mean, this was like, I guess just to be candid, this was at BP in the middle of the oil spill. I mean, so this is
yeah.
somebody who was able to pull that together in the middle of that.
Yeah, that I mean, just that word humanness just comes to mind of like just
Yeah.
recognizing people's humanness. And I'm so glad you talked about that because one of the things I wanted to ask you, and this perfect segue into it, is around when you have leaders and companies who are focused on this and putting this at the forefront of their responsibilities, right? To know that that is part of your responsibility is to hold that space for people and to help them through it. Like, what do we see? Because, companies are always looking for, well, what's in it, what's in it for us, or what's the ROI? Like, you just hit on something so important is this level of trust, this level of loyalty. I mean, I work with organizations all the time from a leadership development perspective, and we're hearing things around retention issues and engagement surveys, and people not feeling connected to their work. And it's like, when you have people like that leader, you have loyalty and you strengthen the relationships, and they're more willing to show up because you took the time, to recognize that like there's life outside of the walls of the company.
Yeah, absolutely. The research shows people are willing to take a pay cut for a more empathetic work environment. I mean, I personally have done that. And when I train, I ask people about it. And regularly, at least a third of the audience says, yeah, I've taken a pay cut for a more empathetic workplace. And when I say, do any of you regret it? They laugh. Like, of course not,
Yeah.
And I think, as you said, like right now we're seeing, again and again, like challenges around engagement. People are being asked to do more with less, and a lot of people are really struggling in terms of burnout. And this is the thing that can really be a game changer for organizations. If you can create the kind of workplace culture where people know that you care about them beyond what can you produce for me by Friday, right? Which, obviously you have to meet the deadlines, you have to get the work done by Friday. But if they know that you actually are willing to take the extra 5 seconds to say, like, how's your father doing? Like, those are the things that show people that you actually care about them as a human. And those are the things that will keep people, engaged in the workplace. They maintain the loyalty, the trust that you need to be able to thrive over the long term, especially in the environments that we've got today.
Well, and again, I mean, I don't like to take the emotion side out of it, but from a business perspective, if they're thinking of, just like the numbers side of it, when we look at the cost too of, wow, what does it cost to lose employees and then have to replace them versus what is it, costing us to maybe give someone an extra day or two off to be with their father? Like the cost itself to invest your more time into the people you already have versus losing them and having to find the talent. Like, so I think also helping people to see that perspective is like, this isn't just a nice to have, this is like a need, especially now. And like you said, with the burnout and with so many things people are experiencing, so many things going on in the world, it's only going to keep getting more escalated. And so what are a couple things, obviously you help help people to be able to navigate this in the workplace. So what are some things that a leader, that a company, what people could be doing? And I know you kind of mentioned some things that you did for yourself, but anything else on what somebody could be doing as a leader to, if they were like, hey, I really want to get better at this?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think is really helpful is just the quick check-in. Like, so there's research that shows that psychological safety is highest on teams where supervisors check in with their direct reports at least once a week. And it can be a super simple, just like, hey, how was your weekend? Even better if you know something about them, like, how did soccer go this weekend? Just something that shows that you are interested in them beyond, where's that memo you promised me, right? So aim for a quick check-in with everybody on your team at least once a week. Another thing that I think is really, really powerful is what I call noisy self-care. So it is one thing, and it's a great thing, to talk to your team about the kind of ways we take care of each of ourselves and that it's important to take care of ourselves. So, for instance, to say, hey, we've got a phenomenal EAP program. They offer free and confidential counseling. I hope you'll reach out if you could use support. Like, that's a great thing to say. But even better, if you can say it, is to say, we've got a phenomenal EAP program, free and confidential counseling, really helped me when I needed it. And I would suggest you reach out if you could use some support. Like, when you say that second thing, you make it a lot easier for others to do the same thing. And you model the idea that taking care of ourselves is something that matters here. So think about, what are the things you do to take care of yourself? Maybe it's that you don't look at your phone on Sundays, or maybe it's that you, I don't know, maybe you have been sober for a decade, or maybe you went back into therapy this year, or maybe, I don't know, whatever it is that you do to take care of yourself, be open about it, because when you talk about that, you help create the kind of workplace culture where that's a priority, where people know that you mean it, you're really walking the walk.
I love that modeling. I just want to emphasize that. If I had a big billboard right now, I'd put that up there, right? Because it's one thing to say it, or even from the top to say, well, we expect you, all of you down below me, to do this, right? But people are looking to you to set the example. So modeling it is how you actually make it part of the culture versus just saying it. So amazing. So checking in, I mean, how amazing, right? And how, and all the things that you could do, how simple to just remember to check in once a week. How are you doing? And just ask them, especially if you know something that had happened. So checking in and then modeling it, referring them to the resources, but also saying, how you've utilized them. Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for this conversation. I feel like we could just go and go and go and talk about all the things, but thank you for being vulnerable to share your own, how you help support yourself. I think, those stories that you share where you've seen it in action are really helpful. And then those tangible tips. So if you're someone listening right now who's like, hey, I have someone in my life or in my workplace that I'm trying to support, try these things out to support yourself, but also to support them. And especially if you're in a position in an organization where you have influence over others and over the culture, this is your responsibility, and you get the opportunity to help pave the way in the company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say those two tips, like the check-ins and the noisy self-care, you can do that regardless of your job title. You have the ability to check in on your colleagues, to talk about your own self-care, and to have an impact on your workplace culture, regardless of how long you've been there, how old you are, what your job title is.
That's such a good point. Yeah, we don't have to just look to the leaders to do it. We can all own that.
Yeah.
That's such a great point. Katharine, thank you so much. So share with us, first of all, everybody who's listening, make sure you check out Katharine's book, The Empathetic Workplace, 5 Steps to a Compassionate, Calm, and Confident Response to Trauma on the Job. Also make sure that you give her a follow and check her out on LinkedIn. Katharine, where else can people find and connect with you?
Well, one of the things that I like to do is every Thursday at about noon Eastern time, I send out a text message that is just about empathy and leadership and resilience and all the things we've been talking about. It's just kind of my way of helping people remember to keep these issues front of mind. I sometimes share quotes or articles or just little tips like the breathing techniques and stuff we talked about. So if anybody is interested, it's just a free thing and you can opt out anytime. But if you want to join that, you send the word Blackbird, which is my company name, Blackbird, all one word, to 833 975 1945. 833 975 1945. And I would love for anybody to join.
That's amazing. We'll also make sure we drop that in the show notes too. So if you weren't able to write that down, you can scroll down if you're listening to this episode, and that would be amazing to get those tips and just that little reminder too, because I think for sometimes people they might not make it as much of a priority, but if you get that little reminder, that can be the great prompt. So, Katharine, thank you so much for joining me today. All of you listening, I hope this was helpful. Please, please, please share this out so that this can help more people get Katharine's message out to even more leaders, workplace individuals, to help have more empathy in workplace and in your personal life. So, Katharine, thank you so much. And remember, everybody listening, that it starts with you.